TanStack Router is a must-have library when creating multi-page React applications, and it solves one single problem very elegantly, and that is routing. So what is routing and how can you implement it using TanStack Router? Let's say a user visits your website. They click on the About link and land in your About page. Notice how the URL path also changed to /about. Similarly, when they click on Contact, they land in your Contact page. And of course, the URL is also updated to /contact. So what is routing? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just matching a URL to the correct UI components. And TanStack Router does this very beautifully using file-based routing. To understand file-based routing, we're going to go one step back and take a look at how routing was implemented in React before TanStack Router, and that was programmatically, meaning in the code. So inside the main app component, you would simply import the routes component from, for example, React Router DOM, which is another older routing library, and use it to define your routes. For example, you can define the first route, which matches /, which is the home page, and then you can pass in your UI component. In this case, this is the home component. You can also define a second path /about, and here we're going to pass in the about component. Similarly, we can define a third page /contact, and here we're going to pass in the contact page. And we can also define a fallback route by providing a not found component. Luckily, TanStack Router takes a different approach, which means you don't have to write all this kind of code. You can simply take care of your file system. So inside your source directory, you can simply create a new folder called routes. And here you can define the routes that you want to have. For example, index.tsx. This is going to handle the home page. You can have an about page, and this is going to match /about. Can have similarly contact.tsx, and this is going to handle /contact. By now, you're probably already wondering what is inside these files. Well, let's take a look. So this is the content of the homepage, and we start by importing create file route from TanStack React Router, and we use this to create our route. And here we also pass in the path of the route. And of course, we also need to provide the component that we want to show the user. I know at first glance this looks like a lot of tedious code, but actually that's not the case, because actually all of this is all generated for you automatically. So every time that you create a file inside your routes directory, this is the code that is generated for you. And normally you only need to modify this part of the code, just change the component that you want to show to the user. The cool thing about using files to define the structure of your website is that it comes with a lot of goodies. One of them is the ease of creating nested routes, which means that inside our routes folder, you can add another folder. And in this case, this is going to be a blog, and then we're going to have an index page inside this blog. And this is going to match /blog. We can also define other routes inside this folder. So another, for example, blog article is going to be ReactJS, and this is going to have the path /blog/ReactJS. Now, obviously, if you have a blog, you don't want to create a new file for every blog article that you have. And for that, we can actually take care of path parameters. So here we have a path parameter called slug, and we define it by using this $sign. And not only is this going to match /blog/ReactJS, it's also going to match /blog/ basically any string that you want to have. Inside the blog page, you can also get access to this path parameter by using route.useparams, and this is going to have the same name as the one that you defined in your file name. Now that you have access to the slug, you can use it to query your data. For example, here we're using React Query, and we are getting the data and then showing it to the user. Now, one important thing I want to let you know is that if you are fetching some kind of data, it's best not to do it inside your component, and there are actually two reasons for that. So the best way to load any kind of data would be to use this loader parameter that you can pass to create file route. And here we are just grabbing the parameters and getting the blog data. And inside the blog page or the component, you can access this data using route.useLoaderData. And there are actually two reasons for that. First one is that you get access to built-in loading components from TanStack router. So you can provide a loading UI to be shown to the user while the data is loaded. And you do this by using the loading component property, and you can also provide an error component by using error component. And the cool thing about error and loading components is that you can also define them globally. So inside your router.tsx file, you can also specify a default pending component and a default error component, which means that you don't have to define these in every page. You just have to define them once globally, and they're going to be used in every page that is using a loader. Of course, in every page, you also have the possibility to overwrite it by providing a specific error or loading component. And since we're in this file, you can also turn on scroll restoration, which means that when the user clicks on the back button, they're going to land in the same place vertically in the website, which is just a very good user experience. Now, the second reason why you should loaders is that it enables pre-fetching. Let's go back to our website example. When a user wants to navigate to the About page, they're gonna go and hover over the About link. And when this happens, this is gonna trigger a prefetch of the /about route in the background. And when the user clicks on About, they're gonna land inside the About page directly. So the data is already loaded. If you load the data directly in the component, this is gonna lead to a visible loading state that then results in the actual UI. Now let's talk about a different kind of parameters that you can use, and that is search parameters. Let's say we have a blog with multiple pages, so the user can actually click on the second page and see the second page of your blog entries. It's a very good practice to store this data in the URL, and for this you can use search parameters, which is just this part of the URL that comes after the question mark. And in this case we have page equals to. Using search parameters or moving state to the URL is literally one of the best ways to improve the quality of your website and just unlocks a lot of features by default. So let me show you how to define search parameters using TanStack Router. Let's go back to our route, and here we're gonna import Z from Zod. So Zod is just a runtime validation library, and we can use Zod to define the schema of our search parameters. And here we're just gonna say we wanna have the field page, and this is going to be a number. And in case the user didn't provide any page, we're going to have the default value of 1. So once we pass our search schema to validate search, we have access to this hook route.use search. And again, this is type safe, so you cannot access a field that doesn't exist. So all the parsing is going to be done for you by TanStack Router and Zod, and you just get the data directly in your component that you can use to load and show the data that you want. So one of the core components that you have to use when working with TanStack Router is the link component, simply because it's too powerful. So this is how you would normally define a link in your website using the anchor element, and you would simply provide the link inside the href prop. But in TanStack Router, you should actually use the link component that comes from TanStack Router. And it's very similar to the anchor element with just a few key differences. The first one is that you provide the target using a true prop. And again, this is type safe, so you cannot just enter any URL here. If you type in something that is invalid, you're just gonna get an error directly in your code editor. Let's say, for example, we want to navigate to a blog entry. Then we can change this to /blog/slug. And here we're directly gonna get an error because we are actually missing a parameter, which is the actual slug. So you have to provide in this parameter basically by using params and passing in an object with all the missing parameters. And the cool thing is that you can also pass in search parameters very similarly by using the search prop. One cool feature that you have to know when using the link component is that it also provides an active props, and these are just props that are going to be passed to this link when the link matches the current page. So if you have a link to /blog and you are in /blog, then all of these props are going to be applied. For example, a class name. But personally, the way that I like to use link, especially when you're using, for example, ShotCN, is to just wrap it in another component. And in this case, I just wrapped it in a button and I pass in as child to the button. So what you end up with is a component that has the appearance of a button but behaves just like a normal link. One of the coolest features about TanStack Router, and I cannot make a video about TanStack Router without talking about it, is layouts. Let's go back to our website example, and let's say that in our blog, we want to have the same layout in the index page as well as in the blog entry page. So what we can do here is take advantage of layouts, and we do this by creating a file with the same name, and this is going to be blog.tsx. This layout file looks exactly the same as a normal file route with one simple difference, and that is that we get to define an outlet. So an outlet is just a specific component that comes from TanStack Router, and this is where all the children are going to be rendered. Now I know this can get a bit confusing, so I have prepared a small exercise that I wanted to go through with you together just to figure out how layouts and components are actually matched with TanStack Router. So let's say we have a URL /blog/abc. We're going to first check if there's any match, and we can see that there is a blog.tsx. So we're going to render a blog layout. Then we're going to check there's also a folder with the same name, and inside this folder there's this file $slug, which also matches the URL. So this is what's going to be rendered to the user. Now if you only had /blog, it's going to look actually very similar. First, the blog layout is matched, and then inside the blog directory, the index.tsx file is matched, and we end up with blog layout, and inside of it is going to be the blog index file. So with all this knowledge about TanStack Router, you should be able to create multi-page React applications very easily. Thanks again for watching, and see you in the next video.